that's a pretty average solve. So here's the 7x7 ShengShou. It's cubical. I mean, I think that's pretty cool because, you know, a while back we just had the V cube. It was pillowed, and we thought this was the only kind that would ever be made. So it's pretty cool to have a cubical one. It's about the same size, same height. I think the V cube is a little taller, but it feels smaller because it's pillowed. It feels smaller in the hands. Mine's a little old, but basically the feeling is pretty similar, but the ShengShou is a little smoother for me. I think that's probably because it's just newer. I mean, I don't think that's much of a difference. The biggest difference I see is that with the pillowed one, if you've got some weird position, it's a little harder to align layers sometimes. But with the square one, it's square, so there's no problem aligning stuff if you have to. It's a little easier to be really precise. Whereas on the V cube, you kind of have to get used to it, and it's still a little bit off sometimes. As for corner cutting, it does cut corners a bit, but if you do it too much, then you can actually, cut corners about one piece, I guess. But if you try to do it too much, then you end up with pieces misaligned, for example, like this. And it's a little easier to get back in than the V cubes. I remember a lot of the time the V cube, if you misalign stuff, you get really ugly lockups. But on this one, you do get lockups, but they're easier to fix, I think. And also, the 3x3 stage is a lot nicer than my 7x7. And I've got the ShengShou 8x8 and 6x6. So you can see the size is about, I guess, halfway between. Maybe it's a little smaller than the 8x8, a little bigger than the 6x6. And the interesting thing is the centers are pretty close to the size of the 6x6 centers. So it's a little bigger than I expected, but it's still pretty nice. It fits my hands reasonably well. I mean, it could be better, could be smaller, I guess. But if you have really big hands, then this will feel pretty small to you, probably. And as for some interesting mechanism things I noticed, the outer layers, these outermost guys have this really neat, like, I don't even know what to call it, but it's kind of like webbing. And that's sort of a trademark almost that I've noticed from the 6 and 8. They also look interesting. And they've also got like pieces on the inside of each piece, little not hooks, but just protrusions that I think keep it more stable, which is an interesting design choice. And I'm not going to take this apart for all the way right now, but it does, I mean, it is pretty easy to get back in, just like the V cube, just like the ShengShou 6 and 8. Another thing is that when I took it apart earlier, I noticed that the edges are really big inside. Basically, the centers have like two square things, and on the innermost one, the edges just barely fit inside, and they actually cover up the corners. So I had a really hard time getting the big center edges out when I took it apart and getting them back in. What that tells me is that there's really no way it's going to pop unless you loosen it way all the way, take the centers apart. There's no way it's going to pop all the way, and you're not going to get a big explosion like you sometimes get on the 6x6s. So I mean, that's pretty nice. You can take other pieces out, like you can take edge groups out, for example, but the core of the cube is not going to come apart. See, these are here. I'll just show you some of the pieces. This is the inner X center. You've got another one of those protrusion hook things, and these two are the obliques. Similar structure to the other big cubes. The weird hook design. This, as you've seen before, is the outer X center. These are our edges, the wings. I mean, a lot of these pieces have protrusions. I'm not really completely sure why, but I think it's just to increase the stability on the inside. So I mean, it's pretty standard design actually. I wouldn't say it's completely V-cube, but it definitely resembles V-cube a lot. These corners are not going anywhere. They're actually under the edges, so you couldn't remove a corner without removing the 3 edges around it, or at least like 2 of them. Whereas, I mean, I'm not going to take the V-cube apart, but if you remember the V-cube 7x7, the centers are sort of like jiggly if you take enough pieces out. Like if you take, you know, all the pieces out around it, they sort of jiggle a bit. But here, the very innermost part is just like really, really in there. So it's not coming out. There's no way. I mean, I think that's nice. I think it's nice I don't have to worry about that. But, you know, there's no way this cube's going to explode, basically. You can get pieces coming out, but it's a lot more solid than some other designs. And, yeah, I mean, the turning's nice. I lubed it. I tensioned it a bit. I made it looser. But I can't really complain. It actually reminds me more of the 8x8 than the 6x6. The 8x8 has similar, like, you know, it turns well. Similar, like, alignment issues that if you're not careful, you'll turn the wrong layer. I don't know. But it's a pretty similar thing. If you liked the 8x8 and you've tried it, the 7x7 is similar. I personally like it a lot more than the V-cube. I've been getting times like 20-30 seconds faster, something like that. So, I mean, yeah, some of that's just because my V-cube's old and bad. But I like this, I'd recommend it. It's worth the money. It's also awesome to have cubical cubes. I mean, I just like the aesthetics of it too. The 8x8 is probably my favorite cube to stare at. And so I gotta thank ShengShou for making these. I mean, it's good stuff. Definitely buy it if you like 7x7 solving. Might do a one-handed solve on it sometime. It's good. You know, you can see from the times. I'm sure someone like Felix or Lin Chen is going to get sub 3s on it pretty consistently once they get used to the cubicalness. I mean, you know, it's a good cube, definitely. I would recommend it.